Shifting priorities with age. You don't need a large circle of friends to feel fulfilled. In our younger years, we're often led to believe that having a large number of friends signifies a successful and happy life. A packed schedule filled with social events, long phone calls, and endless parties can make us feel like we're truly living. A wide social circle used to be a symbol of connection, vibrancy, and even self-worth. However, as we grow older, our perspective shifts. In your 60s, 70s, or beyond, you begin to notice that your energy levels have changed. Long conversations and large gatherings no longer bring the same joy they once did. Instead, they can feel exhausting and sometimes even obligatory. Relationships that once held great meaning slowly start to feel like duties, things you do out of a sense of responsibility rather than genuine desire. At this point, a new question arises. Do I really need to maintain all these relationships? You come to realize that peace, personal time, and mental well-being are what truly matter. It's not that you no longer care about others, but you begin to value your time more and seek to spend it on things that genuinely make you feel alive. As you begin to filter through your relationships, it's not a matter of loneliness, it's about intentional living. Saying no to unnecessary events doesn't isolate you. It helps you reconnect with yourself. You gain more time for rest, reflection, and the activities you once pushed aside because you were too busy. Whether it's reading a beloved book, revisiting an old hobby, or simply enjoying a quiet walk in the park, these moments become more fulfilling. Independence takes center stage. You discover happiness within yourself without needing others to validate your sense of wholeness. As you feel more complete internally, the remaining relationships, though fewer, become significantly more meaningful. You no longer seek the crowd. Instead, you cherish sincerity, peace, and the satisfaction of living life on your own terms. Ultimately, your focus shifts from how many people are around me to how I feel when I'm alone. And over time, this becomes the most valuable form of freedom, no longer needing to prove your worth. You are enough just as you are. In our younger years, we often have a deep desire for recognition. We work hard, socialize extensively, try to fit in, and continuously seek validation from others to feel that we matter. Compliments, praise, or simply being noticed used to fuel our motivation. However, as you enter your 60s, 70s, or 80s, an important realization dawns. You no longer need to prove anything. You've lived through a mix of triumphs and setbacks, love and loss, joy and sorrow. Each wrinkle on your face and every callus on your hands tells a story of resilience. And that, in itself, defines your worth. Not the approval of others, but the life you've lived. You no longer feel compelled to please everyone. You don't need to be part of every conversation, agree with every viewpoint, or uphold a societal image. Instead, you start to live more authentically, embracing what truly brings you joy and peace. Eleanor exemplifies this shift. At 76, she was once a lively socialite, always attending events, group gatherings, and engaging in lengthy conversations. But over time, she realized these interactions no longer brought her true happiness. She became weary of conforming to others' expectations. So she stopped, no longer seeking approval or living by anyone else's standards. The beauty of this shift is that once she stopped chasing validation, she found herself freer than ever. She enjoyed her own company, relished quiet moments, and discovered she wasn't lonely. She was truly alive. This is one of the gifts of aging. You get to be yourself. No explanations, no justifications. You gain the freedom to choose where to invest your time and energy. And you realize that your worth doesn't come from how others perceive you, but from how deeply you know and love yourself. When you stop seeking external validation, you uncover the most precious thing of all, a sense of wholeness that comes from within, freedom from social pressure, choosing peace over forced connection. Throughout our lives, we are often encouraged to maintain relationships, expand our social circles, and stay connected to the world around us. But there's one truth rarely spoken aloud. When these relationships no longer bring joy, they become a burden. As you reach a certain age, you start to feel a shift inside. Conversations that once excited you now leave you drained. Gatherings that once filled the room with laughter now make you want to find an excuse to leave. Invitations that once felt warm and familiar slowly turn into obligations. Events you attend not out of desire, but because you feel you should. This was the experience of James, a 70-year-old man. Throughout his life, he had been an extrovert, always present at parties, reconnecting with old friends, attending the usual social events. He believed that maintaining relationships was the key to keeping life vibrant. But one day, he realized that every outing left him not energized, but exhausted. The conversations had become repetitive, the topics stale, and the effort to maintain harmony was draining. So James made a decision, not to turn his back on his friends, but to choose honesty with himself. He started saying no to gatherings that no longer sparked his interest. He stopped answering calls that filled him with anxiety. Instead, he spent his time reading, walking in nature, and sometimes just sitting quietly at home, sipping tea and listening to his favorite music. What surprised him was this: he didn't feel lonely. In fact, he felt more at peace than ever. By letting go of relationships that had been driven by habit or obligation, he made space for tranquility and truly meaningful connections. Growing older is not about continuing to exhaust yourself trying to please others. It's at a time when you deserve to live lightly, free from the burden of social expectations. The relationships that remain, genuine, though few, will always have a place in your life once you stop clinging to what no longer holds value. Freedom doesn't come from withdrawing from life. It comes from choosing what truly nourishes your soul, cherishing stillness and time alone, when solitude becomes a priceless gift. In our younger years, we often believe that happiness comes from busyness, from meetups, long conversations, and the constant presence of others in our lives. But at some point, as we grow older, that belief begins to shift. The excitement for small talk fades, and instead, you start to yearn for stillness. And to your surprise, you realize that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. In fact, it may be the most peaceful state of all. Eleanor is a perfect example of this change. At 76, she was once a regular at every gathering, from afternoon teas to family get-togethers. But over time, she began to realize that no matter how full her schedule was, she still felt empty. The conversations became repetitive, the stories uninspired, and most of all, she found herself constantly adjusting. Her thoughts, her interests, even her silences, just to fit in with others. One day, Eleanor decided to stop. She no longer attended events just out of politeness. She stopped nodding along to small talk. Instead, she carved out time just for herself, time she had once considered wasted unless shared with someone else. She began taking a book to the park near her home, sitting quietly under the shade of a tree, fully immersed in every page. She started gardening, nurturing each flower bed and vegetable patch as if in conversation with nature. And most unexpectedly, she rediscovered an old passion: writing. Simple journal entries became a place for her to express her thoughts, feelings, and memories from a life well lived. The beautiful part was, she didn't feel lonely. She felt complete, because in that stillness, she could hear her inner voice more clearly than ever before. No more rushing, no more noise from expectations or judgments, just herself, a seasoned, strong woman living in her truth. At this stage of life, time becomes the most precious gift, and when you choose to spend it on things that truly make you feel alive, a cup of tea, a good book, or a quiet afternoon, life becomes gentler, deeper, and more worth living than ever before. Fewer friends, fewer disappointments, learning to let go for a lighter life. In our younger years, we often see friendship as a reflection of our worth. The more friends we have, the more loved and validated we feel. But with time, we come to understand that not all friendships are meant to last. And what truly matters isn't the number of friends, but the quality of those relationships. At a certain stage in life, you begin to feel drained by friendships that persist out of obligation. The phone calls you feel compelled to return. The gatherings you no longer enjoy, but attend just to avoid gossip. These connections start to feel less like genuine bonds and more like forced routines meant to uphold something that has long since lost its spark. Richard is a perfect example of this. Now in his 80s, he once had a busy social life, parties, friends, constant phone calls. But over time, it began to wear him down. Conversations that once brought him joy became burdensome. Lunches that used to excite him turned into sessions of complaints, repetition, and dull chatter. Then, during one particularly draining lunch, he asked himself, why am I still trying to maintain relationships that no longer make me happy? That realization changed everything. Richard started to let go. No more polite nods or half-hearted appearances at gatherings he didn't care for. Instead, he held on to only the relationships that brought him peace and resonance. And something remarkable happened. He didn't feel lonely. He felt relieved. Because when you stop trying to hold on to everyone in your life, you create space for what truly matters. You stop expecting from those who no longer walk with you. You stop being disappointed by indifference, neglect, or lack of empathy. Instead, you learn to embrace the inner peace that comes from within and value those who remain with sincerity. Having fewer friends doesn't mean shutting yourself off. It means refining your circle to keep the connections that nourish your soul rather than drain your energy. And with fewer friends to keep up with for the sake of appearances, fewer expectations, and fewer disappointments, life becomes more tranquil and meaningful. Quality over quantity. Happiness comes from truly meaningful connections. When we're young, we're often taught that having a wide circle of friends is the key to happiness. Society constantly emphasizes that a vibrant life is one filled with relationships. The more friends you have, the more successful and loved you are. But as you reach your 70s and beyond, a truth gradually becomes clear. Not everyone in your life truly adds value to it. Rather than trying to maintain a long list of acquaintances, you begin to shift your focus toward relationships that truly matter. Those who understand you, respect you, and bring peace with their presence. This may be just one or two close friends, or even no one other than yourself. Eleanor, a 76-year-old woman, once believed that staying busy with friends was the key to happiness. She constantly arranged meetups, coffee dates, and attended social gatherings, all to avoid feeling left behind. But over time, she realized that many of those relationships were just habits, not genuine connections. She grew tired of pretending to care and forcing herself into conversations that no longer meant anything. That's when Eleanor decided to make a change. She no longer sought quantity, but depth. She spent more time alone, walking in the park, reading, writing, reflecting. And in that quiet, she unexpectedly discovered something precious. The most important relationship is the one you have with yourself. When you learn to be alone without feeling lonely, you build a solid foundation for lasting happiness. You no longer need validation from others to know your worth. You don't need someone else to fill a void because you've filled it yourself with inner peace. And the wonderful thing is, when you are truly at ease with yourself, meaningful relationships will naturally find their way to you. These are the people who don't require you to perform or please, but who allow you to simply be. Not many, just the right ones. And that is enough. Time is the most precious asset when you learn to prioritize what truly matters. When we're young, time seems infinite. We easily waste away meaningless afternoons, agree to attend appointments we don't look forward to, or spend hours in aimless conversations just to be polite. But as you reach a certain age, often after 60 or 70, you begin to view time differently. No longer as something to squander, but as the most valuable asset you own. At this stage, you no longer want to drain your energy on things that don't bring real value. You realize you don't need to keep in touch with everyone. You don't need to be everywhere. And you certainly don't need to pack your schedule just to feel like you're living. Instead, you begin to choose, carefully and intentionally. James, a 78-year-old man, was once very active. He spent his youth building a career, nurturing relationships, and taking part in countless social activities. But as he entered retirement, he started to feel weary. Social engagements no longer excited him. Reunions with old friends became repetitive retellings of the same stories, with connections slowly weakening. One day, James sat in the small garden behind his house, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves, and asked himself, "How do I truly want to spend the time I have left?" That question changed his perspective on life. He stopped chasing obligatory phone calls. Instead, he began prioritizing what brought him joy, peace, and genuine meaning. He spent more time gardening, reading, talking with his grandchildren, and quietly reflecting on his life. He no longer worried about what others might think if he didn't show up, because he understood clearly, every passing hour is a piece of life you can never get back. Time, once lost, cannot be replaced. So when you recognize its true value, you start to slow down, live more deeply, and live more mindfully. You begin to ask yourself, is this worth my time? And if the answer is no, you are strong enough to walk away. At this age, you no longer live to please others. You live to honor your own life. And that begins with treating time like a treasure, using it for what truly makes you happy. Living according to your own choice, not others' expectations. When we're young, most of us live according to what others expect. We try to be a good child, a reliable friend, a dependable colleague, or an active participant in every gathering. These invisible expectations seep into every decision, from how we dress, where we go, to the people we associate with. We chase after the fast pace of life, often without pausing to ask, how do I truly want to live? But then, one day, when you enter a more mature phase of life, often after the age of 60 or 70, everything begins to change. The things that once seemed important lose their weight. You no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. And most importantly, you begin to hear your inner voice more clearly. Richard is a living example of this transformation. At the age of 80, he was once a very beloved person at parties, always showing up on time at every friend's gathering. But after many years of maintaining relationships out of habit, he realized that long conversations no longer brought him joy. Meals filled with complaints left him exhausted, and he began to feel disconnected from himself in such situations. One afternoon, after leaving a gathering with old friends, he sat down on a wooden chair outside his house and asked himself, why do I keep living to the rhythm of others instead of my own? That simple question sparked a new journey, to live according to his own choices. Richard began saying no to gatherings that no longer brought him happiness. Instead, he said yes to the things that truly brought him peace. Quiet mornings with a cup of tea, reading an old book he had once put aside, taking walks in the park without any reason other than enjoying nature. When you live in the way you choose, you begin to slow down. Not slow because you're fading, but because you understand the value of every moment. You no longer try to keep up with others. You no longer need to live to please anyone. And strangely enough, when you live authentically, you feel lighter, freer, and happier. There's nothing wrong with having once tried to be accepted, but at some point, you deserve to live true to your own self. And when you do that, every day becomes more complete and meaningful than ever before. When life enters the stage of maturity, we begin to realize that time is the most valuable asset. One of the important questions we need to ask ourselves during this stage is this how I want to spend my time? This question not only pertains to work, but also to the relationships we maintain. Have you ever wondered if the people around you truly add value to your life, or are you just keeping those relationships out of a sense of obligation? Many times, we continue to hold on to relationships simply out of habit, societal expectations, or the demands of friends and family. We spend time on meetings that don't bring us comfort, conversations that revolve around shallow topics, or gatherings we have no enthusiasm for. However, as our time becomes more limited, these types of relationships no longer have a place in our lives. Relationships of obligation, not choice, will leave you feeling exhausted and gradually lose their spark in your life. Try asking yourself, does this relationship bring value to my life? A simple question, but one that can help you gain a clearer perspective on what truly matters. Maintaining relationships out of obligation can drain your energy and time on things that don't bring happiness or personal growth. Richard, an 80-year-old man, is a testament to reconsidering the relationships in life. In the past, he always participated in friend gatherings, attended parties, and engaged in social activities out of a sense of duty. However, over time, these conversations no longer brought him joy, and they became obligations to fulfill. Richard realized that his time was more valuable and decided to spend time on things that truly add value and meaning. Therefore, the question, is this how I want to spend my time? Serves as a powerful reminder to reassess all the relationships in our lives. Do they truly enrich your life, or are they relationships you maintain because of a feeling of obligation? If the answer is no, it's time to courageously say no and free yourself from relationships that no longer serve your personal growth. Ending relationships that no longer hold value doesn't mean you will be lonely. In fact, when you start spending time with yourself and on things you enjoy, you will feel more at ease and happier than ever. You can find joy in reading books, taking walks, or pursuing personal hobbies you may have missed out on because of maintaining social relationships. This question is the key to living a life true to yourself, not one shaped by others' expectations. Remember, time is a precious asset, and you have the right to choose to spend it on things that truly bring joy, peace, and value to your life. Richard's story, an 80-year-old man, is a vivid example of how time and lifestyle changes can influence personal perceptions and choices. In the past, Richard had a busy schedule, filled with social gatherings, parties, meetups with friends, and constant phone calls. His days were packed with diplomatic and social activities. He felt like he was always caught in an endless cycle, having to participate in conversations, meetings, and events that he couldn't decline. Although these activities once brought joy and connection, over time, Richard began to notice a significant shift in his feelings. Fatigue started to set in, instead of the excitement he once felt. Long conversations no longer brought him the same joy. Instead, they drained his energy. Social gatherings, once a source of joy, now became obligations he had to bear, simply due to responsibility and habit. Casual chit-chats were no longer interesting, but rather a repetition of the same old stories with nothing new. Realizing that his time was becoming increasingly limited and more valuable, Richard began to rethink how he spent his time. He decided to change his lifestyle, no longer engaging in activities he no longer found interesting. Instead of continuing to live by the expectations of others, he chose to slow down and dedicate time to things that truly brought him joy and peace. Richard started spending time on hobbies he had previously neglected due to his busy social life. Reading books became one of his favorite activities, a way for him to relax and expand his mind. He also began taking walks in the park, enjoying the fresh air and the tranquility of nature, something he hadn't had time for before. He even began pursuing forgotten hobbies and passions, like gardening and painting, things he had only dreamed of before. Surprisingly, when Richard changed how he spent his time, he didn't feel lonely or deprived. On the contrary, he felt happier than ever because he was living life the way he wanted, no longer bound by old relationships and social obligations. Instead of feeling exhausted and stressed from trying to meet others' expectations, he now lived a life of freedom, happiness, and true meaning. Richard's story is an important reminder that our time is a precious asset, and we have the right to choose how to spend it on things that bring joy and peace. As we mature and begin to reassess our lives, we realize that not all relationships or activities need to be maintained if they no longer add value to our lives. As you grow older, you begin to realize that not all relationships need to be maintained, especially those you keep out of a sense of obligation. The constant effort to please others, engaging in meetings or gatherings that no longer interest you, can truly drain you and rob you of your freedom. However, when you decide to let go of relationships that no longer bring joy, you will experience a profound shift in your life. You will regain time and space to dedicate to yourself. Letting go of relationships out of obligation is not easy, especially when you are used to attending every event and maintaining connections with everyone. However, as you become aware that your time is limited and valuable, you start to see that the burden of relationships that no longer align with your needs can take away precious moments that could otherwise be spent on yourself. You no longer have to participate in exhausting social interactions or engage in conversations that no longer excite you. This allows you to feel much lighter and less stressed. When you dare to release relationships that no longer add value, you can begin focusing on what truly matters in life. Instead of worrying about pleasing others, you can dedicate time to taking care of your health, whether it's going for walks, practicing yoga, or having a quiet morning for meditation. You can rediscover forgotten joys, like reading books, journaling, or engaging in creative activities that you previously didn't have time for. Taking time for personal hobbies helps restore you physically and mentally. Peace also becomes a vital part of life when you no longer have to worry about meeting others' expectations. Quiet afternoons alone, without any calls or invitations, can provide relaxation and recharge your energy. You begin to appreciate silence, realizing that it is not loneliness, but an opportunity to reconnect with yourself. The process of letting go of relationships out of obligation is not about giving up, but rather an act of liberation. You no longer feel controlled or anxious about pleasing everyone. Instead, you can choose to spend your time on things that truly matter and bring you happiness. Life doesn't always need to be filled with social relationships, but rather with moments of freedom, silence, and satisfaction with yourself. As you enter the later stages of life, you gradually come to realize that true friendship is not about outward appearances or the number of people around you, but rather the relationship with yourself. Throughout life, we are often taught that happiness comes from having many friends, many people who care about us and share with us. However, as you age and go through life's challenges, you begin to understand that true happiness starts from within. One of the important lessons you learn as you grow older is that you don't need a large circle of friends to feel happy or fulfilled. In fact, a relationship doesn't always bring peace and joy. You might have many friends yet still feel lonely, without a sense of genuine connection. Social gatherings, shallow conversations, and casual meetups sometimes only leave you feeling exhausted without adding any real value to your life. Therefore, when you begin to understand that the most important relationship is the one with yourself, you will feel lighter and much happier. Taking care of yourself and understanding who you are is essential for living a meaningful life. You will no longer seek validation or approval from others to feel worthy. You will learn to love and appreciate yourself, accepting both your strengths and weaknesses. When you truly feel whole, you won't feel the lack of affection or attention from others. You'll know that fulfillment and happiness start from within. True connection with yourself also brings peace, as you're no longer swept up by the expectations and pressures of society. You no longer need to chase after social gatherings just out of obligation or to please others. Instead, you'll begin to dedicate time to things that truly matter, like nurturing your soul, taking care of your health, or pursuing your personal passions. That's when you realize that true friendship doesn't come from many people. It only needs to come from one, yourself. Happiness isn't about having a lot of friends, but about self-understanding and self-love. When you know how to love yourself, you naturally create relationships around you without feeling burdened or having to pretend. These relationships will come naturally and sincerely because you no longer lack affection or companionship. You won't feel lonely when you're by yourself because you've learned to enjoy solitude and find joy in moments spent alone. The relationship with yourself is the foundation for all other relationships in life. When you can feel confident and happy in your own life, you'll naturally attract friends who truly understand and respect you. And that's when you can experience true friendship, not as a result of circumstances, but as deep and genuine connections that start with self-awareness and self-love. Eleanor's story, a 76-year-old woman, is a testament to the change in how life and relationships are perceived as one enters adulthood. In the past, Eleanor always felt that she had to stay busy, attend social gatherings, and be part of events, all because she feared loneliness. She couldn't bear being alone and always felt the need to connect with others to avoid being left behind. This led her to constantly adjust herself to meet the standards and expectations of those around her, even though it often made her feel tired and not truly happy. However, as time passed, Eleanor gradually realized that seeking approval from others didn't bring her true happiness. She began to feel exhausted by shallow social meetings, insincere conversations, and the constant need to change herself to meet everyone else's expectations. It felt as though she was living a life that wasn't hers, but one shaped by others. This was the moment when Eleanor decided to make a change. She began to accept being alone, no longer fearing loneliness. Instead of trying to fill the void with meaningless social relationships, Eleanor decided to take time to care for herself, reflect, and rediscover the interests and passions she had neglected during her busy years. She learned to love herself more, embrace the silence, and enjoy moments of solitude without feeling lonely. The result of this change was that Eleanor found peace within herself. She began to experience life more gently, no longer facing the pressure to please others or engage in relationships that didn't add value. Instead, she found joy in simple activities like walking, sitting alone with a cup of coffee, or reading a book. This gave her a sense of freedom and the ability to live true to herself, no longer influenced by external factors. Eleanor no longer sought approval from others. She realized that her life was her own, and she had the right to decide how she wanted to live. This allowed Eleanor to feel lighter and freer than ever before. She no longer felt bound by society's expectations or unnecessary gatherings. Instead, she lived a life she wanted to live. Eleanor's story is a reminder that true peace and freedom come from within. When you can accept yourself and stop seeking validation from others, you will feel happy and complete. Life can become lighter and more meaningful when you learn to love yourself and live in the way you desire. There is a clear difference between being alone and loneliness, and this becomes more evident as you grow older and begin to understand yourself better. During the earlier years of life, many people often fear facing loneliness because society has conveyed a message that loneliness is unacceptable, a state that should be avoided. However, as you age and go through the ups and downs of life, you begin to realize that being alone, Tao, is not synonymous with loneliness. Loneliness often comes from a sense of disconnection from others, from a lack of affection and communication. When you feel lonely, you often feel abandoned, with no one to share joys, sorrows, and important moments in life. Loneliness can make you feel empty, anxious, and without purpose. However, being alone is entirely different. It is a conscious choice, a stillness you can find in your own space. When you are alone, you don't necessarily have to feel lonely. You can enjoy peace, freedom, and space for reflection, to do things you love and nourish yourself. In contrast to loneliness, being alone can be a very fulfilling experience. When you learn to appreciate moments of solitude, you realize that it is a gift that life has given you. It is an opportunity to connect more deeply with yourself, to find peace in your soul without being affected by external factors. These quiet moments are a time for you to reflect, read, paint, walk, or even just sit quietly and appreciate the beauty of nature. Being alone can also help you learn to love yourself, allowing you to find small joys that you may not have noticed before when you were always caught up in social relationships or a busy work life. It is an opportunity to rediscover forgotten passions, hobbies, and to recharge your energy. Not everyone easily realizes that stillness and time alone are precious. Society often views being alone as negative, a sign of loneliness and lack of affection. However, as you mature and gain a deeper perspective on life, you will understand that being alone is not something to fear. It is an opportunity for you to explore the depths of your soul and create a richer life, independent of the presence of others. When you learn to live alone without feeling lonely, you have truly found freedom and happiness within yourself. You will see that quiet moments are not just a chance to rest, but also precious time to grow and nourish your soul. The difference between being alone and loneliness lies in your attitude and choice. You can turn time alone into a journey of self-discovery and self-love instead of feeling lack or emptiness. Friendship is one of life's most valuable gifts, but maintaining friendships is not always easy or natural. As you mature, you gradually realize that true friendship is not something you can force or search for at all costs. It will come naturally when you start loving yourself. When you are younger, you might think that having many friends will bring joy and happiness. You may feel pressure to maintain multiple relationships, participate in every social gathering, or even try to hold on to friendships that have gradually faded just because of social expectations or a sense of obligation. However, as you grow older, you start to realize that true friendship is not an effort or an obligation that you have to maintain. In fact, your best friends will naturally appear in your life when you learn to love yourself and understand your own worth. When you can love and accept yourself, you will no longer feel the need to change yourself to please others. You will realize that relationships should be built on sincerity and mutual understanding, not on demands or coercion. When you no longer make efforts to please others, you will begin to attract people who share similar values, people who genuinely respect you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. True friendship is when you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to be yourself, and your true friend will come to you naturally. These people won't come for selfish reasons or to gain something from you. They will be by your side because they respect you, share common values, and genuinely want to build a deep connection. When you are no longer dependent on the approval of others, you will feel freer in choosing the friends you truly care about and sharing valuable moments in life. The right people will come when you no longer seek them hurriedly, but instead create space for the relationship to bloom naturally. In particular, the friendships you build when you understand and love yourself will be lasting ones. You will not feel exhausted or drained in maintaining them because true friends will always bring you peace and happiness rather than a sense of obligation or burden. You won't need to cling to them because the relationship will naturally exist, be sustainable, and bring joy to both sides. When you love yourself, you also learn to cherish true friends, those who stand by you in both good and bad times. People with whom you do not need to change yourself to please them. Friendship will come naturally and provide you with peace, support, and a deeper connection than any other relationship you've had. Friendship is one of the most important relationships in life, but as you grow older, you'll realize that true friendship is not something you need to search for or desperately hold on to. When you learn to love and respect yourself, authentic friends will come to you naturally. In fact, deep and lasting relationships only appear when you no longer feel the need to change yourself just to please others. When we're young, we often tend to connect with many people and maintain relationships just for social reasons or the desire for recognition. You might feel pressured to have a large circle of friends to prove your worth and be loved. However, as you age and begin to understand yourself better, you realize that friendship is not a competition or a forced effort. True friends will come when you're no longer actively searching for them, but instead, when you start loving and accepting yourself. True friendship is not about maintaining a relationship with anyone out of obligation. It's about relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. When you feel confident in yourself and no longer need to prove anything to others, you'll attract sincere friends who truly understand you. These relationships don't come from changing yourself or trying to please others, but simply from harmony in the way you live and think. When you love yourself, you'll also learn to clearly identify what is important and what isn't worth keeping in your life. You'll realize that not everyone deserves to be in your life. True friendship can only develop when you stop forcing relationships that don't add value. You will keep only those who genuinely match you, people who enrich your life and bring happiness and meaning. The key is that when you no longer search for friendship at any cost, you create space for natural and sincere relationships to grow. You won't feel the need to prove who you are or what you do to be loved. Friendship will come naturally when you create an environment where people with similar values can easily find you. And the magic is that these relationships will bring you peace, joy, and support without ever making you feel tired or drained. When you truly love yourself, you also learn to appreciate valuable relationships in your life. You won't need to rush to find friends or maintain relationships that don't make you feel comfortable. True friends will appear naturally, and the relationship between you and them will naturally develop, lasting and meaningful. True friendship is not about competing or maintaining at all costs, but about a deep connection built on self-respect and love for oneself. In life, we often tend to hold on to relationships even when they no longer bring joy or real value. We do this because we believe that in order to have value, we must have a wide circle of friends and maintain relationships with everyone, regardless of our personal feelings or needs. However, the truth is that life becomes more complete and meaningful when you learn to let go of relationships that no longer serve your growth and happiness. Letting go is not just about abandoning relationships that no longer bring value, but also about releasing societal expectations or the pressure to always please others. When you no longer feel the need to maintain relationships out of obligation or the desire for acceptance, you will feel lighter and freer. Letting go of relationships that no longer align with you creates space for the things that truly matter, things you love, things you're passionate about, and genuine relationships. When you let go, you no longer have to live according to someone else's desires. Instead, you can live the way you want, based on the values and principles you set for yourself. Life is no longer dictated by societal standards or the demands of others. It becomes a life of freedom and the ability to choose the things that bring you happiness and peace. Letting go of relationships that drain your energy allows you to live authentically and regenerate joy and calmness in your life. In fact, letting go is the first step to finding a more fulfilling life. When you no longer have to worry about maintaining relationships that aren't truly important, you will have more time and energy to focus on things that truly satisfy you. You may rediscover forgotten hobbies, spend time caring for yourself, or pursue passions that you haven't been able to pursue because you were bound by unnecessary relationships. Letting go is a powerful act, but it's a necessary step for creating a simpler, lighter, and happier life. You will realize that you don't have to maintain every relationship to feel valuable. Your life will become richer and more meaningful when you live authentically and no longer carry unnecessary burdens. Only when you let go of what no longer fits can you embrace new opportunities, meaningful relationships, and a more complete life. James's story, a man in his late 70s, is a clear example of how one's perspective and choices about life can change with age. In the past, James believed that maintaining social interaction was crucial for a healthy and happy old age. He participated in every gathering, event, and never declined calls from friends or acquaintances. He thought that this would help him avoid loneliness while maintaining an active life and staying connected with the community. However, over time, James began to feel tired. The small talk that once seemed enjoyable now became a burden. Social gatherings, whether with friends or acquaintances, no longer brought him joy. Instead, they caused stress and exhaustion. The repetitive conversations and meaningless appointments made him feel as though he was trapped in a cycle of unnecessary social obligations. After some time reflecting, James realized that his life should not be dominated by constant social interactions and gatherings. He started to notice that what mattered was not the number of friends or events he participated in, but the quality of what truly brought him happiness and comfort. He decided to change his way of living, refusing to attend gatherings that weren't truly necessary or didn't bring him joy. Instead of trying to maintain social relationships out of obligation, James began to find time for himself. He spent more time immersed in nature, walking in the park, appreciating the quiet and beauty of his surroundings. Relaxing afternoons with a favorite book became one of his greatest joys. James returned to personal hobbies that he had neglected in the past due to lack of time. He read books on topics he loved, learned new things, and found peace in each moment. Rather than chasing unnecessary relationships, James focused on nourishing himself and finding joy in the simple things. James's decision is a clear testament to the shift in lifestyle that often comes with age. He no longer felt pressured to maintain relationships or participate in social events if they didn't offer real value. Instead, he found peace in dedicating time to the things he loved and realized that life could be full and happy without being bogged down by unnecessary social obligations. As we age, one of the most important lessons life teaches us is that true freedom doesn't come from clinging to every relationship, but from choosing the things that truly align with ourselves. This freedom is not about avoiding people or living in isolation, but about the ability to let go of relationships that no longer bring value or joy, making space for more meaningful things in life. Letting go does not mean completely rejecting relationships, but ending the burdens caused by maintaining relationships out of obligation or habit. When you no longer have to force yourself to maintain encounters that don't bring joy or real connection, you begin to realize that your time is a precious asset and you deserve to spend it on what truly makes you happy. This could be taking care of yourself, pursuing personal hobbies, or simply spending time with people you genuinely cherish and relationships that bring peace. Letting go is also a way for us to learn to love ourselves more. When you no longer live to please others, you can live an honest and free life. The time spent on relationships that are no longer fitting, on meaningless small talk, can be transformed into time spent doing things you love, discovering yourself, and seeking inner peace. This freedom is a process of realization and acceptance that you don't need to hold on to everything, but rather, you need to appreciate what truly matters. The story of older individuals like Richard and Eleanor is a clear testament to this. They once lived busy lives with many relationships and social events, but when they realized those relationships no longer brought joy or fulfillment, they decided to change. They began to let go of what no longer suited them, and instead, they devoted time to things that truly brought peace and happiness. The freedom they found was not from rejecting all relationships, but from selectively choosing valuable relationships and dedicating time to the most important things to them. Therefore, true freedom does not come from maintaining every relationship or fulfilling every social obligation, but from letting go of what no longer holds meaning and choosing what truly matters. When you begin to live this way, you will find life becomes simpler, lighter, and truly brings joy and peace of mind. Life can sometimes become complicated and filled with unnamed obligations that we feel we need to fulfill. However, one of the important lessons we can learn as we grow older is the ability to let go of things that no longer bring value, to create space for what truly matters. The final message I want to share with you is, take some time to think about something you can let go of today. It could be a relationship that no longer fits, an obligation that doesn't bring joy, or a societal expectation that you feel constrained by. We often live with the feeling that we must maintain every relationship, fulfill every obligation, and meet others' expectations to prove our worth. However, at a certain point in life, you'll realize that not all of these things bring satisfaction or happiness. In fact, they can leave you feeling stressed, tired, and lost. That's why letting go of them is a way to free yourself from unnecessary burdens. When you learn to let go, you'll find that you have more time for yourself. Instead of striving to please others or participating in conversations and events that you don't truly care about, you'll find joy in the small, simple things. It could be quiet moments with a favorite book, a peaceful morning in nature, or simply taking time for yourself to think and relax. The important thing is that you don't need to keep relationships just out of obligation or habit. A relationship is truly valuable when it brings joy, understanding, and mutual support. If you find that a relationship is only causing you fatigue, stress, or no longer fits with who you are, don't hesitate to let go. You deserve to have sincere and meaningful relationships, ones that help you become better and bring you peace. Ask yourself, is it time for you to let go of an expectation, an obligation, or a relationship that no longer brings comfort or happiness? This letting go is not a loss, but an opportunity to reclaim space in your life, to embrace joy, peace, and freedom. When you start doing this, you'll feel the lightness in your soul, and that is an important part of living a fulfilling and happy life. So think about one thing you can let go of today and allow yourself space to fully enjoy life. Truly, when you let go of what's no longer necessary, you'll find life becomes much simpler and easier. Start now to create a life full of joy and peace for yourself.